Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, the channel where we are making a computer role-playing game using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. If you've been following this series of videos, you'll know that one of the results that the player character can currently get when interacting with a group of monsters is that they agree to trade. And I have, since the last video, made a simple system for trading, and that's what I want to demonstrate in this video and also talk about how the code works. Now, I've cheated a little bit. I've made a few characters until I got one that had the attribute that I wanted. I wanted one with a high willpower, so just because that's more likely to get the particular result that will demonstrate the new part of the code. So here we are at the start. We have the option of various approaches or other things. I'm going to try a haughty approach, and they do allow us to trade. They also present us with gifts, but that's something that I haven't coded yet. So you'll see that I've made a fairly simple system of 5 spices that I chose them because these were historically quite valuable spices. And I've also added a number of shells that the player starts with, which are meant to be cowrie shells. I might change it so it specifically says cowrie shells. That was a thing that I made up in a previous project because I thought it was neat to think of people using seashells to trade with. But it turns out that that's actually historically quite accurate. In fact, there were many more people trading with cowrie shells than there ever were trading with gold coins, which is sort of the standard in Dungeons and Dragons and similar games. Gold was never really used as an everyday medium of exchange, and cowrie shells were. So perhaps I didn't make it up. Perhaps I'd read about that and then just sort of it came back to me, and I thought it was an idea, but it was actually a memory. But anyway, so shells are the sort of the currency equivalent, and then we have these 5 spices that are that different groups of monsters will buy and sell at different for different numbers of shells. And you notice that the price to buy is always higher than the price to sell by at least 1, as it is with cloves, and then there's a considerable difference with pepper in this particular case. And some of the numbers are links. In other words, we can click them and that counts as a choice. At the moment, we can't sell any spices because we don't have any in our character sheet. Under the shells is where they would be displayed. So, for example, we can buy nutmeg for 8 shells, and so that reduces our shells down to 42, and we have 1 sort of measure of nutmeg. Another thing I need to do is probably specify what that means. Does it mean a pound or 1 bottle or 1 vial or something like that? 1 pinch, perhaps. And now, because we have some nutmeg, the sell option is now an actual option rather than just being the number. But of course, we'd be quite foolish to sell it because we've just bought it and we'd be selling at a loss. And so we can sell. We might want to buy some cinnamon, and then we might want to buy some ginger. And if we keep doing this, of course, we'll run out of money. And we can see now that these numbers are just plain white numbers because we don't have enough money to buy those. We can still buy nutmeg because we have 8. So that's how it works. It's fairly straightforward. There's no haggling involved. It's just they have a straight price that they'll buy at and a price that they'll sell at. And obviously the idea is that you want to find a group of monsters who sell a particular thing cheaply, and then another group who'll buy that for a large amount. And that's sort of one of the longer term aims that the player character will have when he's in the dungeon. So, and when we're finished, of course, we just continue and it goes on. So that's how it works. It's very straightforward. As with the rest of the game, it doesn't look very good because I've prioritised just getting the thing working at all, and then I'm going to look at improving the display of it, making it a bit more aesthetic. So let's, for the rest of the video, look at the code. Now the relevant page we want is this one, trade, which we go to now. If we get a relevant result, such as this one, where they present us with gifts and allow us to pass through their territory and offer to trade, it'll include trade. And it will also happen up here, which is a less good result, but still involves trade. I have uploaded this new version to the itch.io page, so if you want to download that and have a look at it for yourself, you can now do that. But let's have a look at what we do. I'll zoom in a couple of times. So we have a new attribute, SN, which stands for spice names. And in the data page, which is at the beginning of the game, we have this array that has the names of the different spices. So cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, pepper, and ginger. So if I wanted to get rid of a particular one and add another one, it would just be a matter of updating that array. And we also have an array SA, which is spice amounts, and it's the amount of spices that the player character has. And at the start of the game, we set that all to 0 because later on in the code we'll be looking at the amount in there, and if it's undefined as opposed to 0, that can generate errors at particular points. So I set it all up to be 0 with a for loop going up to sn.length -1, which is to say, in this case, up to 5, and it'll set SA1, SA2, SA3, and SA4 and SA5 to be a value of 0, because of course you start with 0 of anything. Now at the moment we have SB, which is you can buy. So SB4 is the number of shells that you can buy spice number 4 at, which would be pepper, and so on for the other spices. And then SS is, of course, SB is spice buy and SS is spice sell. That's the opposite array, as it were. Now, at the moment, I've only got, the array is only one-dimensional. The only dimension is the spices. But of course, it's going to need to be three-dimensional because we're going to need to keep track of these figures for all groups of monsters that will trade. So when we get to it, SS will actually be a three-dimensional array where perhaps it'll be the X location of the monsters, the Y location of the monsters, and then the price. So and that will be true of both SB and SS. But for the moment, it's just a one-dimensional array. And we set up the amounts like this. We roll the equivalent of a d6. We roll the equivalent of 2d6, two six-sided dice. We roll the equivalent of two six-sided dice again. And if X, this set of two-sided dice, is less than W, this set of two-sided dice, then we swap them. We have another variable U. We set U to be equal to X. We set X to be equal to W. We set W to be equal to U, which of course is the old value of X. And so the result of those three operations is that X and W will change their values. If X is equal to W rather than being less than it, then we just add one to X. So in both cases, if X is less than W, then swap them, or if X is equal to W, then increase X. In both cases, X will be higher than W. And as you probably guessed, X will determine the price at which you can buy stuff, and W will determine the price at which you can sell stuff, and the price at which you can buy stuff is always going to be higher. And so the way it works is we set the relevant slot of the SB array to be X, the higher number, plus Y, this single dice, and then we set the equivalent slot in the SS array to be, again, Y, but this time plus W. And because it shares that Y value, the prices will be sort of similar. If the price is low, if the buying price is low, the selling price will tend to be low, and if the buying price is high, then the selling price will tend to be high. It struck me that that was probably more realistic. That, you know, there'd probably be a sort of the amounts would be similar. They wouldn't be identical, but they'd be similar. And then, of course, we get the /4, which just means that's the end of the for loop. We do that for every slot of SB and SS based on this, which is the length of the array that gives the names of the. Sorry, SN is spice names dot length -1, and as we've seen in previous videos, that is the size of the array, or the number of slots that are filled in if you're starting from 1. Has to be -1 because I think computer languages tend to count from 0. They tend to count 0 as being the first slot rather than 1. But anyway, we do need to put that -1. So once we've done that, we then go to trade 2. Trade 2 is the page which prints out the prices. Some of them are links, and we can click those links to alter the amounts of stuff that we have. Now, it's done as a table because that's an easy way to get things in neat columns, and you don't have to trade at all. The player can just press continue, and then you go on to this currently empty page. But if you want to trade, it'll print out an array, and I'll show you how it does that. Now, we know that TR, well, you'll know if you've looked at previous videos that TR is a table row. TD, I don't know what it stands for, but it's a cell within that row. And on the top row, we have an empty cell, and then the text price to buy and the text price to sell. So those are the sort of column headings. The blank array, I could have put name of spice or type of spice or something, but I thought it was obvious enough that I could leave that. So that's the top row. You can tell it's the end of the row because of that /tr. And then we have a for loop. Again, it is based on sn.length -1, so it's going through every spice. We start a row. We have a cell which is aligned to the right and prints the name of the spice. And then we have a cell which is aligned to the right and has a very complicated bit of code there, and has an if-else structure. So what this is saying is if CS is over SBZ, well, SB is shell buy, CS is carry shells, that starts at 50. So what this is saying is if the player has carry shells that has more carry shells, or at least equal carry shells, to the buying price of this particular spice. In other words, if the player character can afford to buy this spice, do this, or rather do this, and I'll get to that in a second. If they can't afford to buy the spice, just print the buying price of the spice, but not as a link. So this is one of these ones where it's set Y equal to this very long bit of text, and then print that very long bit of text. And I'll go through what you get, an example of what you get. So the first thing is 2 brackets. Then we get the buying price of the relevant spice, and then we get this vertical line, and we get a link to trade to. Well, it won't print that vertical line. All that means is because we've got this bracket here and this bracket here, it'll print the number, and the number will be a link, and the link will be to trade to, which is the page that we're on. So it'll be something like, in terms of what Y is equal, it'll be something like this. And then we have this end bracket, and then we have a beginning square bracket, CS to CS minus SBZ. So what this means is set the value of the player's carry shells to the current value minus the buying price of this spice, because if they click on the link, they've indicated that they want to buy the spice. So that might be, let's say that price is 10 and we haven't engaged in any trade or anything that has increased or decreased the amount of shells that we have. It might be something like CS to 40, and then it'll be a colon, and then SA, let's say 4 to SA 4 plus 1. In other words, look at the value of SA4. SA is the number of spices that the player has of each type. So, and then set it to its current value plus 1 because they've bought one. So let's say we've got 0 in SA4. And this, by the way, is why I had to set SA, all of the SA slots to 0, because undefined plus 1 isn't 1, it's like an error. So that's why we had that for loop at the beginning, which sets all the SA slots to 1. So Y will be something like that, and then this command print Y will print all this, and what we the player see is something like a number, and it's a link, and if we click on the link, it sets our carry shells to 40, i.e. it reduces them by 10 because these are trading at 10, and it sets our the number of this particular spice to 1 more than it was. So if it was 0, it sets it to 1. In other words, it simulates that we've bought one load of that particular spice. There's no undo sort of function in this, by the way. If we do it, it's just done. It changes our attributes. You'd have to go back in the built-in arrows in the game, and I'm not even sure that would work, to be honest. So what this all means in sum is, if the player has enough money to buy this particular spice, then print the price of this particular spice as a link, and have the link come back here, but come back here with the attribute, with the variables changed such that they have bought one lot of it. Or if they can't afford to buy it, just print the price, and it should be obvious to them, why they can't buy it, why there's no link there. And then we have essentially the same thing, but for selling. If they have more, if they have at least one of this particular type of spice, and again, this is an example of why we had to have SAZ set to 0, because if undefined is over 0, I think sometimes that generates an error from memory. Anyway, if SAZ is over 0, do this complicated thing. Otherwise, just print the relevant value of SS, which is the spice selling price. In other words, if they have any spices to sell, do all this, and this will do a very similar thing. It will create a link which sends them to trade 2, increases their carry shells by however many you get for selling this particular spice, sets the number of relevant spice that the player character has to 1 less than it was. In other words, go back to this page, but simulate having sold 1 copy of this, one unit or one whatever of this particular spice. Or if they don't have any of that spice, just print the number that is the selling price, because the player, if they're taking notes and kind of being careful, they'll write all this down, and if they get those spices somewhere else, they'll know to come back and sell it at a profit if it's a potentially good price. And then we end the row, and then we just do that for every spice. And so we get what we saw at the beginning of the video, which is a series of a sort of little miniature spreadsheet almost of numbers, which are highlighted if the player has the option to buy or sell. And then when they're finished, or if they don't want to trade at all, they just continue, and it goes to a new page. So that's how the trading system works. It's very straightforward. You could do something very similar if you were, for example, having a shop where people can buy weapons and armor. You just have to change the, or if they were able to sell weapons and armor, as you can sometimes in games of this type, you just have the different variables changing. So if they were buying a weapon, you'd add a weapon to whatever the relevant slot was of their inventory, for example, and then you'd reduce the gold by, or whatever the money in the game was, by the amount of, by the price of that particular weapon, for example. So that is the simple trading system. There's other things that could be in there, like, well, what if you want to steal instead of buying? You know, perhaps you could have the option of doing that, and if you fail, then maybe they become hostile or something happens like that. You may have the option of bargaining and trying to get a better price, or a higher price if you're selling, or a lower price if you're buying. And then again, that might succeed in altering those numbers, or it might sort of go horribly wrong and result in them becoming hostile and kicking you out, or something like that. But for now, it's just a basic system of buying and selling. And I hope that was of use or interest to some of you, and I hope that you will tune in next time.